Cruise ship workers at Reddit. What was the biggest OID moment on the boat that luckily passengers didn't find out about at all? I worked on a cruise ship for 3 years. I've got a lot of these kinds of stories. But here's my favorite one. Our ship officers got a call from a ship of a completely different cruise line. Off the coast of Cozumel, Mexico. They found one of our passengers floating in the ocean. He wasn't even near the shore at all. Just floating in open water. He was alive and perfectly fine. They reviewed the security footage. And in the middle of the night this guy was drunk on deck 5 and could be seen holding his phone, dancing to music by himself. He then climbed onto one of the lifeboats and did a running jump into the ocean. He left his phone on top of the lifeboat. His body was so fluid from being drunk that he wasn't injured when he hit the water. The cruise ship spotted him and rescued him. His family didn't know he was missing because he had booked a separate room. This guy told the news that a rogue wave pushed him off the side of the ship. He was on deck 5, so the wave would have been over 40 feet tall. Don't know what happened after that. The entire crew was talking about it for weeks before it hit the news. Though, edit, here's the article on the incident. Some of you are asking if it was a suicide attempt. And I don't believe it was. He was dancing for a while by himself and seemed to be just really drunk and having a good time. He was screaming for help when he was rescued. But ultimately he's the only one who would know. Edit 2. I am relaying the information I heard through the grapevine from security and other crew members. I don't know if being drunk helped him survive the fall into the water. That's just what I was told from several people on board. We were sailing from Hawaii to San Francisco to dry dock and make repairs to our ship when a propeller crapped out a day and a half into what should have only been 7 days at sea. So it added a day and a half to the voyage. People were panicking. Everyone thought we were going to run out of food. Until the captain reminded everyone we had enough food for a month at sea. And if it was any longer, some perishables might spoil. But they could fly in supplies in an emergency if needed. We arrived in San Francisco with no more delays. Anticlimactic, I know. On a side note, watching a giant cruise ship getting lifted out of the water to dry dock is surreal as hell. Also, sailing under the Golden Gate Bridge and looking up from the 13th deck was super surreal. I was hoping the whole time we were going to clear it. It was probably only about 50 feet above my head. Since there aren't too many responses yet, here are a few good ones from similar older threads that are worth revisiting to get the conversation going. uCrusher79 said, once, more than I was touring a ship for a future event. The ship was about to leave for a 100+ day cruise. I saw a lot of old people getting on with oxygen tanks. I asked him what happens if they die on board. He said it was very common for old people blow their life savings to come spend their last days on this cruise. He also said they have a fully functional morgue. UNTM said, once, more than odds are, someone died on your cruise. More than think about all the old folks you see get onto the boat. For a lot of them this is their retirement home, and cheaper than a lot of other retirement homes. They are literally taking cruises until they die and we eventually find them in their cabins. Pixelix said, once, more than I am a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white hot party that you're all going to. But once we finish our shift all hell is breaking loose in the crew bar. More than just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping there are crew members having sex, smoking and drinking. Our beers are $1. No drugs or spirits though. More than we also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo, yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the happy couples game, heard it. It was said last cruise and the one before that, and the one before that. More than we are not allowed to duck to passengers. But we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. More than there are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to die. More than no, I do not know where Jack Rose is. They're not real people. Water pipe burst in a storeroom and soaked all of the spare toilet paper. This was on day 2 of a 14-day voyage to Antarctica. The cabin stewards had to swap around rolls of paper between low-use and high-use guest cabins and it came right down the wire. None of the guests found out or realized. Now toilet paper is hidden in every cabin instead of a centralized location. I'm working on a cruise ship currently. One time we had to turn around to take someone to a hospital, and then there was a fire in the laundry room, and it was also pretty rocky seas. Also people die on cruise ships, and the bodies are kept in a special freezer. I mean, you gotta do something with the body if you're at sea. Edit. While this blew up. Testicles. That is all. Was a passenger who found out. I was on the Costa Serena in January 2012. Just cruising around the Mediterranean. Woke up one morning and all of the crew and wait staff at breakfast were stone cold and depressed looking. They made us do an extra lifeboat drill that morning. To all of our confusion. Found out later that day that our sister ship, the Concordia, sank overnight but didn't have many other details. My now wife wasn't on the trip and didn't know the exact name of the ship I was on, and found out before us. She was terrified till the next morning when I could get onto the ship's internet connected computer. We also found out the crew was especially depressed because a lot of them had family on the other ship and very little information. Took a few days, but things got back to fairly normal. I just remembered doing lifeboat drills and thinking they were a waste of time. Learned that lesson. Edit. MySQL reminded me about the extra lifeboat drill. Added that detail. There are small fires in places like the kitchens that happen somewhat regularly. Most of the time they're controlled quickly and no one even knows they happened. People drop dead all the time, especially on some of the nicer lines that are basically floating retirement homes. Ironically, it's when there's a survivable medical emergency that guests become aware of it. When they need to do an emergency evacuation either by tender boat or helicopter. One of the ships I worked on, a guest jumped off an open deck while we were at sea. He survived though. I think he was super drunk more than he was suicidal. Norovirus outbreaks happen regularly. Fart a literal OID moment for some people. Edit. Probably the worst accident that happened during my tenure was when a kid literally put his eye out on a ball valve handle on one of the open decks. Pretty sure word spread quickly on that one though. Edit 2. Sorry to disappoint everyone, but I don't know U2 tsunami. I'm sure similar things have happened before. There's hundreds of thousands of people cruising at any given moment, and many of them are getting it faced. I work on cargo ships, but I've trained with cruise ship workers, so I've heard a few stories. I read your comment below, and generally the news only picks up on accidents on ships if it's a major accident involving a lot of people. So pretty much only cruise ships, and luckily besides the Costa Concordia it's pretty rare these days. I do know that they have codes when speaking about incidents though, so to not alarm passengers. For example, if someone is hurt dead, quite common. If you have a heart attack at sea then your chances suck, and they need to call for help via tannoy, they will use a code so the passengers don't know what they are talking about. Also, as someone else mentioned, certain cruise companies that attract older passengers have a separate fridge for bodies because getting through a trip without a death is not so common. Well, all the passengers found out, but on a QM2 transatlantic crossing one of the kitchen staff got drunk one night and hurled himself overboard in the North Atlantic. The ship basically found out the next morning when the first mate kept calling on the ship-wide intercom for him to go to his post. That afternoon, the captain announced what happened and that the ship was turning around to, with the help of 3 nearby merchant ships, try to search for him. Of course it was foggy as hell and you couldn't see 100 it, but just about everyone was on the railings with binoculars trying to search for the poor guy. A wedding even stopped on board. The whole party out looking once the announcement came that we were in the search area. After, shockingly, nothing was found. The concierge desk set up a multinational currency donation box to send to his family back in Chile. There were 4 days left in the trip at that point and every day that box was stuffed to capacity. I hope it helped them. All of the computer systems run on Windows 7, including all of the automation in the machinery space, security system, fire detection system, etc. When Windows updates it will restart the computers, as it does with a normal desktop. Unfortunately it can also take out every computer at the same time and we're flying blind until it finishes. People may be more worried to hear that there is a hole in the hull, yet they're actually fairly common occurrences in older ships and easily plugged. Fires happen occasionally. The most terrifying was a crankcase explosion. The fire suppression systems are good at extinguishing them quickly enough though, so they're not even a concern to the crew. Unless Windows is updating at the time. Edit. A crankcase explosion doesn't mean the engine is in pieces. Oil mist inside the crankcase explodes and the resulting blast it pushed out through the blast doors. Also, the fire suppression system is independent. That was a joke. The monitoring system is Windows based and just means we can't see what sensors or which sprinklers have been activated. The speed and fueling controls on an engine are mechanical and the local control is pneumatic, so keeping it running isn't a concern. All of the auxiliary systems are controlled by the computer system and are passed into local control and controlled by the watchkeeper if and when it occurs. Ship just arrived in Whittier, Alaska, the port for Anchorage, and an elderly passenger dropped dead while walking down the gangway. A conflict ensues between the port security and the ship's medical team. The port security didn't want the ship's medical team to get involved because it technically happened off the ship and the local authorities had jurisdiction. There really was no saving the guy, but the ship's medical team at least wanted to try, but the local authorities wouldn't even allow the chief medical officer to start CPR. The coroner had a 6-hour eater, so the port authorities bagged up the body and stuffed it in an X-ray machine storage container in port, guarded by local police, until the coroner could arrive to take the body to Anchorage. The wife of the deceased continued on to finish the vacation for the 7-day rail trip to Denali. It was a 14-day gimmick. 7 days at sea. 7-day scenic rail trip. My understanding was the cruise line calmed her entire vacation, arranged for the remains to be returned home at no cost to her, and provided a personal escort assistant for the remainder of her vacation. I was playing a production show, guitar, was standing on stage with a wireless unit alone to play Purple Rain, and then all of a sudden the house lights came on and the curtains closed. Everyone in the audience looked at me, and I ran off the stage. Turns out a sewage pipe burst backstage and there was it everywhere. Show was cancelled and the passengers didn't find out why. I used to be a crew member, and one time a guy working at the front desk jumped overboard after a crew party. He was found a few hours later by the Coast Guard, and everybody was asked to be discreet in order to keep the cruise running smooth. And everything was fine until the captain came on the PA and said we were delayed because a crew member jumped overboard. Then the madness begins. Rumors appear out of nowhere, and the rest of the cruise was pretty much guests asking what happened the whole time. A lot of it happens on board. I could write a book, maybe even more than one. Another time a guy committed suicide in his cabin, and his family was on board, including a little girl, but this time it didn't leak to the guests. I saw the family as they were being escorted to the security office. Felt so bad for them. A friend of mine got fired for getting wasted. Got pissed and starting peeing all over his cabin while the security guys were there to take care of him. He spent the night in the little jail on board before being dumped the next day in whatever port we were. Also, every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put a dead body. I went on a cruise once. There was an infestation of lice and I got off at the first port and flew home. Carnival fully reimbursed me. Somebody shot at the navigation bridge of the ship from the shore on my last ship. The bullet bounced off and hit my colleague on the hand. No real damage, but it scares the hell out of her. Ended up going home for a few weeks, while we waited for the local police to come on and investigate and take statements. Guests were told we were delaying the departure to take on fresh water. I'm still shocked that never leaked out. Edit. Oh wow. My highest rated comment ever, and I have no idea if it's because it's my cake day, unintentional pun, or because people actually found my story interesting. Either way, thanks guys. Probably not going to get a lot of answers. I know at least Carnival makes their employees pay for internet. I was talking with some crew and they were asking about current events and politics because they are almost cut off because of how expensive the internet access is. Someone died. My dad has been working on cruise ships for 30+ years, and on one specific cruise we were on in 2008, a man who used to be a sailor all his life took his life. He wanted to die at sea. Stopped taking his meds. Had a small heart attack in the cafeteria but was okay. Then that night he spent the whole night dancing with his family who he brought on a cruise, and he died the next morning. had to be kept in the freezers until the next stop in Greece, where his family got off and went back to Hungary. All the other passengers were informed that he went home due to his health issue because it was a very public thing, but it was for his funeral. They still come back to the ship every year. Also, they lost the anchor once. I contacted my dad for the video and details and will update soon. Update. Seems like I'm a disappointment for more than my parents. Dad can't contact me yet, but I did some digging and I believe the ship wasn't the one he was on. Let me explain. My mom showed me this video that my dad sent. Due to the remarks, I believed it was Greek workers, therefore my dad's line and communication was weird when he was near Norway, so I believed it happened on the ship he was on. I really apologize for the misunderstanding. It was years ago and a head injury occurred in between. In the video, by the way, the machinery snaps where the brakes are. Again, sorry. Can confirm everything here so far. Dead people, missing persons, suicides, crew and passengers busted drug muling, wild crew parties with 60-cent beers and $1 pack of smokes, so much sugar, group 6, etc. Breaking the crew packs, mingling rules all the time, fires, man overboards, medical emergencies, helipad avocs. They use codes. Oscar equals man overboard. Bravo, fire. Star code equals medical emergency. Equipment fails where you drift for an extra day or two. Sometimes blamed on ports or weather, other times they are honest. Storms and rough seas. Bath bags everywhere and bouncing off walls. Boat drills. Crew and passengers. Twice per week. Hell, so many. I'll try and think of more. AMA if you want. Source. See username. Did 5 years in shipboard casinos with Celebrity Royal Caribbean. I was a cruise ship worker for a few years, and on a route between two cities there was a really bad storm. So a few minutes after the passengers got off, the storm got so rough that the ship was ripped off the docks and drifted out to sea. Because it takes quite a while to start up the engines, it took some time until we got back to the harbor. Not really dangerous, but if it had happened while the passengers were deboarding, it could have gone badly. Edit. This happened in Sweden a few years back. Don't know enough about engines to explain why they take so long to start up. But to the people calling bullet, here is an article about the incident in Swedish. Not a crewman, nor am I a bosun, but I went on one of those overnight cruises to Bruges, and we caught one of the seamen with his pants literally around his ankles as he was balls deep in one of the waitresses. We skiddled the heckaroo out of there and later found that it was actually a couple who were on the cruise as passengers and were role playing, and that we had actually barged into their cabin by accident while drunk. I don't know a lot about cruise ships, but I do know that the pools on the Titanic after all these years are still full. No, the house band doesn't care if you are the second coming of Eric Clapton. We aren't going to invite you on stage to hear your version of Sugar. Just relax and enjoy yourself. Yes, we sometimes have bad nights. Playing 3-4 hour sets 5 nights a week for months on end does leave some room for us to not be on our A game sometimes. Just relax and enjoy the show. Welp, looks like we need to cut the set short tonight. Kids, the drummer just had a heart attack. Be sure to tip the waitress. The DJ will be right up to keep the music going. A new guy miscalculated the pool treatment and one of the jacuzzis ended up with a pH less than 2. It was discovered before the area opened, and that one remained netted for the rest of the day while it was balanced. A wiper painter stood on a small cupronickel black water pipe to reach higher on the bulkhead. Literal oh-it moment. From the floor to his knees. If you're pushing 140 revs on the shaft and the ship still won't break 15 knots, check the bulbous bow for whales. My buddy worked in the theater on a cruise ship and always had fun stories from traveling around. Cool thing, beers are less than $1 in the crew bar. Bad thing, you always have to be sober enough to operate a lifeboat and man your station during an emergency. Crew members getting left in countries because they were off getting drunk and chasing cute locals. Old people dying and being put in a freezer on a low deck near one of their storage areas. Good times. That a door is a flotation device for two. One time I was on a cruise, and a few cabins down, a man and woman who were cheating on their wife and husband, respectively, got super drunk and fell over the edge of their balcony. from really high up. It was at night too. The whole cruise ship stopped once it was reported and it took like an entire day to search for them. Apparently the man had his jeans or something because he had inflated them somehow and they were floating holding them. They reported that they were stung by multiple jellyfish and were super cold the whole time. That must have been the scariest, most terrible 18 hours of their lives. I currently work for a cruise line on shore. I have assisted people who want to bury their loved ones at sea. Obviously, the bodies have to have been cremated and the ashes have to be in a biodegradable container. It was actually lit. Stranded on the ocean with our sewage system backed up. Never go on a cruise. Oh yeah, the passengers did find out about that one. Background. Small cruise ship in the 50-200 passenger range and we were running in the South Alaskan waters. Our ship's chief mate just left for another job so we had a new guy who came from running cruise ships to the oil rigs in the Gulf. This was the first night with this new chief mate who was supposedly a highly qualified captain. It was right in the butthole of the night. Probably about 1 to 3 AM. It was mid-fall and an overcast night so it was dark as Deech in his personality. There are 2 deckhands that work the night shift and we stand watch on the bridge every other hour. We mostly just stand there and look out the window with binoculars. That's pretty much it. Just look out the window. We were not really allowed to do much else. Sure, we could watch the instruments but it was a small bridge so we were pretty much stuck on the left side with one radar screen and spotlight controls for the small spotlight, the chart, the big radar, AIS, GPS and chart plotter were all on the other side where the watch officer was. We were lookouts, a second set of eyes and had nothing to do with the navigation or control of the ship. The event. We were cruising though this area that had a few small islands and a few larger islands. This was some time ago but if I had to guess I'd say it was right in this area. 52.0 divided by 22n plus 135% C2% B034 feet 49.1 divided by 22w at 57.4292432 minus 135.5937953 13z data equals exclamation point 4m63m51s0x0 0x07e28m23d57 4311176 4D 135.5802915HL equals NI was on bridge watch but it was right at the end of the hour so I had just been relived. Luckily, because I still had my night vision, I was still hanging out on the bridge just chatting with my relief and this new chief mate. That's when I saw what looked like a shadow on the water. It was extending left from an island. Something about it didn't look right so I kinda did something a little out of character for our role as deckhands and jumped over to the big spotlight and flicked it on. That's when we saw, just a few boat lengths in front of the ship, a rock and gravel shoal. It was low tide and this big long shoal was just smack dab in front of us. This new chief mate cranked it hard over and luckily we missed it. It did rock the boat quite a bit and we all just stood there in shock. Lucky nothing more came of it other than a hard turn. Thank God it was the last hour this new chief mate was on watch and thank God I was relieved from bridge watch. Apparently it was very quiet and very awkward hour with that guy. Follow up. An hour later, after my turn doing safety rounds, laundry, and engine room checks etc. I return to the bridge at the same time our long-time first mate is coming on office watch. The new chief mate leaves and me and my partner start telling the story of what just happened. He is only on watch for 2 hours before the captain comes on watch and he tells us we need to tell the captain what happened. So 2 hours later we are on the bridge again telling the captain. Next day was thankfully a port day. The captain asked both me and my partner to write down what happened and then we could go on shore leave. Duck. Now the chief mate is going to know we tattle to the captain and he can, from experience, make our life hell. On a personal note, while I'm talking about making deckhands life hell, Duck UDK, I'm glad you ran the Nantucket aground. I hope they never let you on a boat again. So we go on shore leave, have fun for an hour or two and come back to the boat dreading our next watch with this guy. Well, turns out the new guy is gone, and a replacement will meet us via seaplane the next day. He was fired that day and sent packing. It turns out all he was doing all night was following the GPS plots. Those are guides, not actual tracks one should follow without using the radar. charts and all the other aids to navigation we have. This idiot was just following a line and doing no proper navigation at all. He wasn't even marking the chart or logbook properly, just copying what the GPS said. Apparently that's all he had ever done in the open waters of the Gulf. Just follow a line, so that's all he did in the tight and confined waters of Alaska. What's odd is that the captain was not on watch with this new guy. He just let him take the watch without training. Pretty unusual because he wouldn't even let the old and very experienced first mate dock by himself. My partner and I received safety awards later that year, but we were asked not to tell anyone why. It wasn't until the end of the season we told the rest of the crew. It would have been a very different night had I not seen that shoal. Edit. Sometimes I think about the things that could have gone wrong. What if I had just left the bridge instead of staying to chat? My partner didn't have night vision yet, so he would not have seen it. What if my relief had shown up late or early? What if the conversation was a little different? What if I had just thought that shadow was just from the trees on the little island and not flicked on the light? So many things could have gone wrong, and who knows how it would have turned out. Would it just have been a collision with a soft sandbar and some paperwork? Or would we have hit hard rock and torn the bottom open, drowning most of the crew asleep in their underwater rooms? So many little variables, and any one of them could have changed the outcome. I haven't worked on a cruise, but I did go on a Disney cruise in February. Obviously we knew this happened, since I can tell the story. As an aside, the cruise was amazing, and even though Disney cruises cost more, ours was entirely done with rewards points. The ship never had lines for anything and the staff was beyond incredible. Anyway, a small electrical fire broke out in a cabin down the hall from us. It's jolting being woken up on a cruise by a general alarm and opening the cabin door to see a crewman sprinting down the hall with a fire extinguisher. The ship's captain quickly walked past as well, with a couple officers flanking him. A few minutes later they had crew stationed throughout the ship's halls, explaining to everyone what had happened and that everything was fine. The family that had been in the cabin got moved elsewhere, and at the next port it seemed like they brought in extra people to clean the floor to remove the smell. It was mild anyway. Fires on ships are scary, and the response is always immediate and probably proportionally larger than it needs to be. My father was a firefighter on his cruiser when he was in the Navy, and he had similar stories. Ships don't duck around when it comes to fire. My sister worked on one for a few years. People did eventually find out, but they use code words over the PA system for various events that can happen. A guy got into a fight with his family and jumped. The ship circled back and used spotlights from their stage shows to look in the water. They could hear screaming briefly, but the guy was never spotted. These were shark waters as well, so he either drowned or was eaten, or a bit of both. There is video. It isn't really NSFW, but probably worth tagging it anyway. A pipe burst and flooded the kitchens. It was a waste pipe, so we had to throw everything out and get a sanitation company to meet us at our next port and go out and buy all new inventory. We gave out vouchers for food, but if we had been further from port that would have been awful. My buddy is right next to me. We work on boats together, but he used to work on a cruise ship. This is what he says. I have plenty of "oh it" moments, but I'll give you my biggest "oh it" moment. So we were stuck in the locks of Amsterdam for over 4 hours and no indication of what's going on. After a few HRS had passed, the captain came on the PA system, and the reason we didn't leave was because there was a live mine from World War II 1 kilometer from the front of the ship. Sorry, I'm on mobile and had to condense the dialogue. A passenger went missing and nobody could find him for a couple days. It turns out he committed suicide in the fan room, so everyone had been sucking dead guy air for a while. We definitely kept that one under wraps. That's the only one that the crew kept secret, but I have some crazy funny stories about working on ships. I was a musician and one time a guest ent, a fly-on act who joins the ship for a cruise to perform one show, thought he was ducking Freddie Mercury and threw out his digipack CDs like ninja stars into a completely dark house. It ended up clocking some old woman a half an inch below the eye and she had to go to medical. The husband wrote the cruise director a very threatening letter basically saying, "My wife almost went blind, so I strongly suggest you give us a free steak dinner." I would usually be hungover, so I'd drink during the day to get over it. I'd go out in port and get smashed and come back. On turnaround days, Days where a new group of passengers arrive. We have to take attendance and do a life jacket demonstration. I was so drunk one time I threw up in the stairwell as passengers were coming in. I somehow didn't get fired or even reprimanded even though everything I puked up was straight liquid and smelled caustically like booze. We all have small cabins in close proximity to each other. We usually keep a spare key under our nameplates in case we lock ourselves out by accident. One night I woke up to a fellow musician who didn't have a shirt on pissing into my wastebasket in the corner. He was so drunk he thought my cabin was his and he got the key from behind the nameplate and just decided to piss into the closest hole.